I'm going to talk a little bit about microboards because I'm part of the community of learning and practice that is Valor Microboards in Perth, and then hopefully a whole lot about friendship and our experience of fostering friendship and some practical ideas around what we can do to nurture relationships. So, hang on, I'll just make sure I can use this gizmo. There we go. So a little bit about who the Valor community in Western Australia is. We're a really small group of families and increasingly supporters who got together about 5 years ago. We were inspired by the model that started in British Columbia actually started in Manitoba originally and then moved to British Columbia more than 25 years ago. Most of our children have severe and complex needs, and most of them also have behaviours which could be seen as challenging. And we're all people where there's been significant failure, I guess, of the service system to be able to attend to our needs and the needs of our sons and daughters. I think that's significant because we've actually enrolled for quite a lot of work in terms of building Valor as an organisation and building microboards for our sons and daughters. So that's a big part of our motivation. We are very much a grassroots approach, but we do work quite hard to build connections with research and best practice in other places, and we're very much wanting to learn about how other people do things to take advantage of prior experience. So I was just going to share with you some statements that we created when we got together to work with each other. So if you've ever worked with a group or worked with a group of families, you'll know that it's not just the case that you can get a group of people together and that it's all going to work smoothly. And I think that one of the reasons why we are working effectively together after 5 years, because we've been through quite a lot and there have been some ups and downs and some frictions and tensions, as you would expect in any group. But we've got this really clear shared idea about what we're about and how we work together, and we often come back to some of the documents that we've created around that when we need some strength or some inspiration to get through some hard bits. So here's some statements that we feel sum up for us what our shared understanding of how we work together. So the heart of Valor Microboards Australia is valuing and respectful relationships through which we influence one another. Together we imagine, explore and dream. Valor people enact a principled and practical approach. Collectively, Valor members seek to build passion, commitment and energy, and to exert influence in positive ways. We push boundaries, we move beyond what we know and create links that really work. This is a collective work characterised by unity and difference and love. So a microboard is a group of family and friends who gather around an individual who has challenges, and that group incorporates to become a not-for-profit association that supports just that one person. Those people need to be in an unpaid and reciprocal relationship with the person, so you can't be on a microboard if you're paid to work with them. The role of microboards is diverse. The idea behind the structure is that it creates a highly individualised support for the person's life. So part of their role is to ensure that the person is socially included and included in the community. There's a significant aspect of sustainability, which is what attracted most of us to microboards. So the first microboard is still actually functioning, and there's a significant number of microboards in BC that we know of who have out-survived parents. And of course, one of the things that we all want to know as parents is how are we going to safeguard our children's future when we're not here. So that was a big part of what inspired us to get involved in this particular movement. So depending on what the person's needs are, the microboard can also theoretically, not quite there in Western Australia yet, but the intent is that microboards can manage funding and take responsibility for employing staff and managing them, finding and keeping employment, helping to plan for and create the person's home and community, their recreation, their social needs, their learning, anything at all that the person identifies that they want. So my son Elis microboard was the first Valor microboard incorporated in Western Australia. So that was about 3 years ago, and they call themselves Blazing Condor Soul Explosions Incorporated. Clearly they are a group of young, energetic people, and I think their name kind of reflects the passion and energy that they have around Elis. So a lot of people think that the process of making a microboard is quite a dry process, and really the incorporation isn't that hard. If it was just about incorporating a group of people, we'd have about 1 million microboards in Western Australia. Of course, it's a lot more complex than that. And the main complexity is around practice, I guess, and how we build collectives to work together and build relationships between the team of people that form the microboards so that they can be effective. There are a number of not negotiable principles that we've adopted from the model in BC, and the three main ones are person-centred thinking, which I think everyone's familiar with, knows what that is. Self-determination is a really strong driving force for us, so we actually spend a lot of time figuring out how to support people to self-determine their own lives and to figure out what they want and to support their choices. And the last one, reciprocal relationship, is what I'll spend time talking about today, and that's the realisation that the community needs to be in relationship with people with disability as much as people with disability need relationship with the community. And it's quite a powerful realisation to have. We describe ourselves as a community of learning and practice, and I just wanted to be clear that we feel like we've achieved some really good things in our sons and daughters' lives so far, and we're at the stage where we're starting to be able to share some of that practice with other families, but there's a lot of work has gone into that. It's not something that's just come very easily, and so there's a number of activities that we identify. The general themes are that we focus a lot on communication on a number of different levels, on relationship and on teaching and learning and research as well. So why do we focus so much on reciprocal relationship? So firstly, the thing is, as the Beatles like to say, money can't buy us love, and we think money is really important, and we're really excited about the NDIS and the idea that there might be entitlement to funding for families in Australia. Families need funding, and it's really, really important. So it's certainly not taking away from that, but there's a bit of a danger that the focus can be that is the answer rather than a big part of the answer. And of course there are lots of people out there that have quite significant buckets of funding but nonetheless don't have good lives and are lonely and isolated and don't have choice. So we're really interested in this whole love thing. And I really like Robert Heinlein's definition, which is love is that condition in which the happiness of another person is essential to your own. And I'm going to talk about my son Eli's friendships, community of friends that he has around him shortly, which has got quite a lot of energy to it in the last 2.5 years, I guess. And I think that it's something to do with this conceptualisation of love that's going on, that there are a lot of people now where Eli's happiness is actually intrinsically interwoven with theirs, and that's part of the motivation for them being there. They need to be there because they're there as much for themselves as they are for him. There's some practical realities, of course, as well. So even if we do get entitlement to funding, it's unlikely that there's ever going to be enough to attend to all of everybody's needs. People have significant needs, and the reality is that we need social and unpaid supports. We all do, to help us to realise our full potential in life. We often get people who question us around, they've decided to choose group accommodation or segregated services for their sons and daughters, and we're absolutely not in the business of being judgmental about that. We believe in supporting people's choice, but even if we do go down those kinds of roads, if we're thinking about how stable a service is going to be in 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years, then we still do need people who are in a close unpaid relationship in a person's life to make sure that they're safeguarded. That's just a reality, I think, whichever path we go down. Okay, so over to my story, or Eli's story. Eli's 21 years old. He has a rare condition called Angelman syndrome, which is considered to be a quite severe and complex disability. It affects pretty much every system of his body. So he has epilepsy and fine motor challenges, and he's not that great at walking. We describe him as being uniquely verbal rather than non-verbal, so he certainly uses his voice to communicate loud and clear, just does not always using typical words. He has some sensory differences. He has significant and ongoing behavioural challenges, and you know, I chair a committee on challenging behaviour, and I know that communication is really important and quality of life, and we really put a lot of effort into all of that stuff for him, but we're still left with this young adult who, you know, is presenting us with challenging behaviours most days. And I'd really like to be upfront about that, because I think there are quite a lot of us out there in that situation, and it's a very isolating place to be. I didn't even know the words challenging behaviour till I was on a committee, and I realised that's what Eli had. Kind of felt a bit awkward about it. So he's quite hyperactive and can be quite destructive. He's still not someone where we can just take him to someone's house without some prior thought, because he's quite driven to dismantle technology, to eat food, and he likes blocking up drains, which is an interesting kind of challenge to have. So, you know, in spite of all that, Eli's been living in his own home now for 2.5 years, and all of his supports at home are freely provided by his Microboard members and friends. So there's a picture up there of Eli and Joe. So Joe's Eli's main man. So I'll talk about Joe a little bit first. Joe made a commitment to be Eli's full-time carer about 3 years ago. He's a bit older than Eli, he's just turned 27. They went to school together, which is how they knew each other. But Joe had been long-term unemployed, and he'd been part of Eli's Microboard formation group, and there'd been discussions around how it would work when Eli lived independently, which we weren't anticipating was going to happen for quite some time at that stage. But Joe elected to become Eli's full-time carer, so he's actually gone on to a carer pension. And I say that it's an unpaid role because if you do the math, the hours and the money just don't add up. But that gives him the capacity to be, you know, make the commitment to be there for Eli 24/7, which of course we don't expect from him. So Joe has his own life as well, but when Joe's not there, the support's provided either by other people in the house or other people on the Microboard or in Eli's community. Joe's sister Coral, who's in the bottom photo, and her husband Jason stay at Eli's place most weekends, and Joe goes, plays football on Saturdays, then goes to church on Sundays and often goes out Saturday nights, so he has lots of freedom. We do get community living funding in Western Australia, which I think is either here or on its way here. So it's not a lot of money, but it's enough to pay probably 2/3 of the rent on Eli's house. So Eli's housemates don't pay rent. We're really careful, like I've seen some community living plans where it's kind of framed up, you don't pay rent and you do 10 hours a week support with the person. We're very careful not to frame it up like that. The way we frame it up is that this is your home as long as you live here. We don't want you to be worried about paying rent or to feel like it's not as much your home as anybody else's home. And it's also in recognition of the fact that Eli's challenging to live with, and you can't leave your shampoo in the bathroom, you can't leave your door unlocked, he might come and break some of your stuff. So that kind of works, and we find that creates much more generosity in people. People tend to give a lot more than you would expect them to if you're not bringing everything back down to dollars and cents. It seems to be a really attractive system, so we haven't had any gaps in terms of people moving out and it just being Joe and Eli. So Pete and Becky's current 2 housemates have just said they're moving out in 3 months, but we've already got the person saying I'm moving in when they move out. So that's kind of cool. What we actually did was Eli's living in the family home, so we moved out. The Microboard decided that that's what was going to happen. I think it's time you left. So we moved out. So what actually happens is the rent on Eli's house goes towards the mortgage on the house that we're subsequently buying. So that kind of works, and it's given him some choice about where he lives. So a little bit about the rest of Eli's life, I guess, quickly. So we're a bit excited. He just finished a unit in drama at Edith Cowan University, so that was a trial project, and he was fully included in a third-year class, and it went really, really well. There's a photo of them doing some drama-y stuff, mainly lying around. That's all drama students do, I think. We call it art. He's in a inclusive community band and plays drums. Really loves doing that. He has his own business called Merger of Minds because he loves technology, so he hires out Panasonic Toughbooks and iPads now to other people who have challenging behaviour, who don't get access to technology and find it difficult to access them. So we've learned a fair bit about making technology robust from Eli. And he also does quite a few, he's done more than 60 presentations now, educating people about people who are uniquely verbal. And he's not one of those folks where he's got a device and, you know, the communication is quite linear and typical. He's quite quirky in terms of how he communicates, and in fact he prefers to use the big button box apps on his iPad, which are sound effects, rather than the $250 app we bought him for communication purposes. You know, so he really loves doing that, enjoys doing that very much. He's got a regular gig at Curtin University. He and Joe and one of Eli's staff co-facilitate one of the Masters in Business units, which is around diversity, and he's done that 3 times now, and he's always backed by popular demand. The students always say that's one of the most meaningful classes that they have in the course. So he loves train crossings and footy and some other stuff as well. I think what's interesting is that Joe chooses to join in some of the stuff that Eli does, so he's quite clear that being with Eli has enriched part of his life. So going to university was never on the agenda for Joe, but we managed to get Joe in as well, and that's been a really great experience for him. Joe has also become a public speaker, something he never thought he'd do, and is really engaging and really enjoys doing that kind of thing. He's not really into music, and he's definitely not into trains though, so they don't tend to do that stuff together. How did we get here? We have all this freely given support. The surprising thing for us was that from the time Eli's moved in, we haven't had to do things like roster, you know, at home, because there just always seemed to be people there, and that was a pleasant surprise for us. And I've done a lot of thinking about how that has come to be, or how that worked, because we really don't know what we're doing here. We kind of got the idea from a microboard in Maryland that we went to visit, but, you know, we're making this up as we go along. I do know that Eli was really lucky to be included at school, so he went to a little community school, which was quite awesome given the time, but he did tend to be excluded from out of school socialising a fair bit, and I spent about a decade being really bitter about that, till I realised that it wasn't personal, and it was more that people just didn't know how to include him, and that it was okay for us to be the hosts, especially given Eli's challenging behaviours, for our place to be the place that people came to. And once I accepted that and stopped resenting it, then we got quite a bit of movement. We did start a circle of friends originally as the foundation for the Microboards, so we had a pizza and Coke night and invited people over that were interested in Eli, and we asked them about what they'd like their relationship with Eli to look like out of school, and what kind of things they'd like to do with him. And that really seemed to shift the dynamic in the group. They started feeling like they had a voice or a pathway to communicate the things that they wanted to do, and that out of school inclusion started happening a lot more once we did that. So Eli's house kind of became the place to be in the last years of school, which is good because it still is, and I think that's a benefit that we hadn't foreseen. So I think creating Eli's home took a good 3 years of really intentional work to make it happen. It started really the weekend that Valor kind of started, because we had a family retreat that my partner and I really wanted to go to, and our paid support fell through and our backup paid support fell through. And then we're like, okay, if we're going to do this, we have to actually ask people to come and spend time with him. And, you know, it was absolutely terrifying and confronting, and I really get how hard that is to invite people. I've always been a chicken around inviting people, and I still avoid it. I delegate that to other folks as much as I can. But anyway, we asked Hayley and Keelan, and Joe was there that weekend, to come and stay and hang out with Eli, and that was the picture we took of them when we came back and said, what was the weekend like? And they said it was great. There weren't any problems. And then we just basically did some experimenting. So we had friends stay over. We had a go at Eli staying at other people's houses, but that really didn't work at all because there was too much havoc wreaked when that happened. There were two friends of Eli's that moved in with us for periods of time, and that was really good because we kind of stepped back as much as we could and kind of observed how that worked and got feedback from them about what it was like to live with Eli while we were still living there. We found that family holidays, which was not something we'd ever negotiated before, especially after the time we stayed in Margaret River, and I woke up and Eli was naked in somebody else's unit eating their peanuts, watching Foxtel. Kind of puts you off a little bit. But we found that behaviour really settled down if he had friends along with him. So this holiday we had with 3 of his friends, his behaviour was fantastic, so it was something we were able to do for the first time. So we've become very aware that there's this really positive social pressure on Eli to behave, you know, to be his absolutely best self when he's got his friends around. It's really powerful. I think it's more powerful than any behaviour management program that, you know, we've ever attempted and failed at over the years. So there's another story here which about, I guess, a learning we have that everybody needs home and community. And so there were 4 siblings that Eli went to school with, and he was friends with the 3 eldest mainly. And what happened 3 years ago was their father passed away unexpectedly. He had bone cancer, and then within 11 months their mother passed away from breast cancer. You wouldn't read about it. And the 3 youngest were about to go into foster care and probably be split up. So Eli had been living independently from us for about 3 months at this point, and so we sort of went, well, there's 2 spare rooms in Eli's house and there's 2 in our place. So the 2 eldest moved in with Eli and the 2 youngest moved in with us. That's pretty much where we're at now. Jamie's moved out, but Peter's still living with Eli and with his girlfriend. And you know, the irony is really not lost on us that we spent all this time going, oh, what's going to happen to Eli if we're not here? But it's actually been Eli who has provided support to some kids whose parents never thought that that was something that they'd have to consider. So that's been a really interesting and powerful thing for us to realise. The way it's worked out for us, we kind of have this village thing happening because we moved next to Eli, the house next door, and we've got adjoining backyards, which is good some days, not good on others. And there's always all these people around, so it's a little bit like living in a train station sometimes, which Eli obviously doesn't mind. Usually we've got sort of 8 to 10 people over for dinner most weeknights, and we have 14 to 16 on weekends because other friends come over and stay, and so it's become a bit of a lifestyle. It's not that bad because how it works is we've got this rotating dinner thing, so I have to cook dinner 1 night a week. I actually prefer cooking 1 night a week for a lot of people than cooking every night for a few, so it's not so bad. And there's the good bit that, you know, we don't have to roster because there's always people. And I think that's really important for Joe because Joe can go out, like he's not tied to Eli, and I think that just looking at the other living arrangements for other valor families, we're really thinking now that at least 2 housemates for this kind of thing so that people have their freedom to, you know, they're not obligated to be there every night. Makes it a little bit more sustainable. So people ask us, has it been hard? Of course it's been hard. There's been some really painful parts, and sometimes relationships don't work out and, you know, people do get hurt. But there have been some really awesome bits as well, and overall we we'd definitely do it this way again. And it's certainly better than what the alternative would have been for us. I think too it's really important that the way that we live clearly is what my partner and I want. It fills some needs that we have to contribute as well, and to have community around us, and that probably relates back to our own sort of personal histories, so it's quite a healing experience for us. And I have this sense that there's work that, it's kind of two types of work and they're both equally hard, but you can do work that absolutely drains you because you don't get results and you don't get anything back from it, and that's what makes you tired. And then there's work that you do that's really hard but it's awesome and you get good results and you get to the end of the day and you feel really energised, and that's kind of what this feels like. We're always going to have to do hard work, but it was how we felt about it at the end of the day that really mattered. So don't panic. This isn't a model, okay? I kind of hate the whole model thing. This is a model that you aspire to. We kind of took somebody else's idea and it's modified and emerged into its own thing. There are other arrangements where it's, a very small group of people or a couple of people and it works. The important thing is that our solution actually wasn't on any menu anywhere, and if we'd been too attached to a particular model, we probably would have missed the fantastic thing, that we've all created together. And I think the other really important thing is just understanding that there is a need for community out there, and that the work that we're doing can help to fill that, and that if we're thinking about not just the needs of our sons and daughters, but of other people in the community, then there can be some real magic. Okay, so I'm a mum, and I like to have some concrete stuff about how you do these things. And look, we really don't know what we're doing, so don't pay any attention to anything I say. But that's just a bit of a disclaimer. But we'll tell you what we reckon so far and see if any of it resonates with you. So one thing that people say for us is, it's okay for Eli, and also another young guy, Daniel and Valor, who's doing really well, because they were both included at school and had friends from school. And yes, that definitely makes things much, much easier. And I think it's why the Canadians tend to be more advanced than we are, because they've got more of a history of inclusive schooling. However, we're certainly making good progress with adults who have been very socially isolated as well. So it's not that you get out of school and it's hopeless if it hasn't happened for you. I think that a couple of things we've observed. One is it's very rare, actually, that people have never had a friend or that they don't have a friend. It's much more common that people have just not noticed. And we do some work reconnecting people with people that they've been friends with in the past where that's been let go of because it wasn't noticed or valued or believed in at the time. The other thing is that as long as people are being included in some kind of social group, then building friendships possible. It's just that you need to be part of it for long enough to get to know people and for relationship to develop. So when we're trying to socially connect people, we're trying to look for things where they can participate for 3 to 6 months to allow time for those natural connections to develop. And we're not fussy if it's segregated or not. A friend with a disability is just as good as any other friend. We just start with where people are at and look at the relationships that they have. There's some really interesting research I saw recently about, actually Daniel Goleman, the emotional intelligence guy, was talking about it, that it's almost impossible for us to make decisions which conflict with our emotional history, so how we've felt about things in the past and how we currently feel about them. And that was a real aha moment for me, because if you have never really believed that friendship's possible and you don't currently feel that it's possible, then what we tend to do is make decisions which stop it from happening. And it's not just about friendship, it's about anything. If you don't really feel that it's possible, the choices you're going to make are going to take you in another direction that is more synchronised with how you feel in your history. So I'll give you 2 examples. I had a prac teacher when he was at school who developed a close relationship with him. And he came to me at the end of his practicum. He was kind of in his 30s. And he said, my wife and I can't have children, and I've developed a really close relationship with Eli while I've been working with him, and I'd really like to keep seeing him. And my wife and I'd like to talk to you about him coming to stay with us on weekends sometimes. So I didn't believe, and I didn't realise I didn't believe at the time. So you all know what I thought. Why is this person interested in my son? You know, no one's interested in my son unless they've got some dark agenda. And of course I just didn't respond, and I let the door close. Later on, Eli's friend Liam, this photo of Liam up there, we started asking Liam to come over when they were at both, early high school, to spend time with Eli. And because Liam actually lived quite a long way away, we asked him to come and sleep over, and he just kept saying no all the time whilst insisting that he was Eli's friend. If I hadn't been in that state where I believed that friendship was possible, I would probably have left it at that, but I was a little bit wiser by now. So I sat down with Liam one day and said, we keep asking you over and you keep saying no. Do you want to tell me what's going on? And he said, I'm just not ready to look after Eli overnight all by myself just yet. Later I think I'd like to live with him, but right now I'm still a kid. I was like, okay. So what he had actually thought I was asking was that Daryl and I wanted to go away for the night and that he would come and stay with Eli and look after him all by himself, which was of course bananas, but he was a teenager. And as soon as I said no, that we'd be there too, he's like, okay, I didn't realise that, I'll come. And the answer became yes. But really, I think we see this in families a lot, that, if your belief influences the decisions that you make and the way that you see things. So if you really don't believe it's possible and you're not aware of that, then the chances of you taking things in that direction are fairly low. So just a quick story about my friend Erin, who lives in Ontario. And her daughter Maggie also has Angelman syndrome, and we support each other a fair bit around this stuff. I was actually there a couple of years ago, and Erin was really honest that, she was terrified to ask Maggie's friends over because the pain if they rejected her would be too big. And we talked that through and came up with some strategies. And Erin's actually created this amazing community of friends around her daughter Maggie now. Again, it's like there was a real need in her community for connection. And there's about 22 girls, and they've started a Sparks unit, and it's just really going well. But one of the things on Erin's website that's really helpful is she's actually mapped out like her belief patterns and how they work. So the one at the top's quite interesting. So what she used to hear if a kid said, Maggie's my best friend, was actually, I don't object to being around Maggie. I will think I like her until I get to know her well enough to know that she drills and wets her bed. And then she thought, that's so cute and delusional, how can they be friends when Maggie can't talk? And then she realised once she started to believe in friendship that what she should have actually understood was that the child was saying, Maggie's my best friend, and what she should have done was ask her over for a play date. I think she's done a really good job of mapping out how her lack of belief resulted in some different decisions being made. So we just suggest that you be aware of your level of belief. You don't have to believe in friendship, but you do need to know that you don't believe and try to make decisions which take you in the direction of friendship rather than in that direction of whatever has happened before. And sometimes what happened before has been really painful. So this is Leighton and Jenny, they're some Valor parents, and they made these yes t-shirts. You'll notice they say yes and not yes but. They used to say yes but they put the yes t-shirts on to just reinforce that they were up for things. Okay, so step 2 is around gathering the support that you need to do this. So I think building friendships around our kids can be some of the hardest stuff that we do. It's risky, and there's safeguarding that we need to put in place, especially as people come into teenager and young adulthood. It can be confronting, and there's no way that any of us would have attempted it without the other group of Valor parents walking there alongside us. We go to training together, and we're there for each other, and there's always someone on the end of the phone to talk to problem solve, or to celebrate good things that happen. And there's also the added benefit of having access to shared networks. So often the people that we all know we bring in to the mix at times, and that creates opportunities for us. We have this real sense that if people have had an experience of the community not being safe, that we could create our own community to begin with, where people could explore what being included looks and feels like, and that from there they get some confidence. And that's certainly what's happened. We have a retreat every year where we set up a temporary inclusive community, and I don't think we're absolutely there yet, but most people come away from that having an experience of being included and of their son or daughter being included in activities with a wide group of people, and that can be a really powerful experience for each other. So we have a sense that if we're feeling isolated, well, we have each other at least. Let's start there and then start letting something grow from that point. There's the reciprocity principle, and understanding that and really starting to believe that the rest of the community needs our sons and daughters, and they do. They really do. I've seen a couple of Eli's friends who had quite serious life-threatening mental health issues who's still with us, and they say that's because of their relationship with Eli and the support and the unconditional friendship that he gave them. So I'm firmly convinced that there are people out there that really need your son and daughter for their lives to be meaningful, and it's up to us as parents to allow those people in. Another thing that people say to us is, where do you find these people? Where are the right people for the microboard, or the right people to be friends with our son or daughter? And there's a sense that there's some particular qualities, of types of people that you're looking for. We're really clear that what we're actually looking for is the right relationship. So there's a really unique energy that's created between two or more people when they're in relationship and connection with each other. And it's different for every pair of people. So I'm sure you've all had the experience of having really toxic relationships with some people and really great ones with others. And it's not always to do with them being some kind of moral example of great personhood. It's just more to do with the chemistry between you. So we really encourage people to look at the relationship rather than the person, because a lot of Eli's friends are awesome with him, but I'll tell you, they've got some significant behavioural challenges and flaws themselves. Another thing that people say to us is, well, my son or daughter has no interest in being friends. We have people over and they go and sit in their room and they don't engage or interact. And I think that that's certainly how Eli used to be when he was young. So we were lucky at school. He was kind of lost in his own world, and he just loved Thomas the Tank Engine and trains when he was young. And the school was smart enough to tell the other kids that when you're walking past Eli, don't go and try and get in his face, but just if he's doing something with Thomas, say, wow, is that Thomas there? Or, which Thomas book are you reading today? Or, I saw a great train on the weekend. And Eli would always respond to that. It was kind of these few seconds long interactions that started when he was smaller that have kind of built into some much healthier ones now that he's older. I think for some of the young people we work with, there's been so much isolation and damage done to them that it kind of takes a couple of years for them to get their trust and self-esteem back. And that's where the valor communities come into play. So there are other young people with and without disabilities in the valor community, and we create this safe place for them to be. And we've seen a couple of people really flourish after having an experience in a safe space and undoing some of that damage, and then getting their confidence to have friends elsewhere and build other relationships. So that's all about this building a community of interconnectedness. But there's something else, there's another layer when we're building friendships. And I think that's the big realisation I had, that we're not building a series of individual friendships for Eli, we're building a community of friends, and that's a much more robust structure to have. So we're thinking about how Eli can support other people and contribute to other people, not just how they can contribute to him. But we've also come to an understanding that it's often a lot less pressure, a lot less stressful if you've got more than one friend. So if we asked one friend over to play with Eli, or to spend time with Eli may or may not engage with them. And there's the Facebook awkward moment where there's this person and there's a mum and Eli's off in his room and there's kind of, a gap. And that's the point at which a lot of families tend to give up, and understandably so. We sussed out, if we ask 2 or 3 friends over and there's an activity, then there's absolutely no pressure on Eli to come and join in if he doesn't want to. And what really tended to happen was he'd come at some point and engage, and initially that was for a really short period of time. It wasn't like the full, engaged friendship that we all seem to expect our kids to have. It was short, but over time that capacity for him to come and join in with friends has increased by using that kind of approach. So we have lots of socially interactive ideas of getting groups of people together and getting them interacting with each other. So we do lots of board games, do lots of making stuff, lots of outdoor games. Valor has lots of social events, and we really think very carefully about how we're going to include everybody. So there's a lot of work done by us in terms of how we modify activities and games so that everybody can join in and so that they're maximally interactive. All right, number 6. We spend a lot of time on communication as well, so we believe that everybody communicates, and part of the preparation for a microboard is documenting people's communication and making sure as many people as possible know how the person communicates. Communication is the foundation of relationship, and look, I'm sure it is over here as much as in Western Australia, an area of really dire need, especially with young adults and older people who are uniquely verbal, that there just isn't enough practitioners who are skilled in supporting communication for relationship building. There tends to be a lot of stuff around choice making, but the real communication we want is the interactive relationship building communication. So we've been working on this a fair bit, and we've been significantly influenced by the work of Gail Porter in Victoria and Jane Farrell, who a lot of you will have heard of, and we feel like we've been making some quite good ground with that. And we actually just got a grant to facilitate the writing of some master's level units at Edith Cowan University in Perth, which will explicitly teach communication for relationship building and community building, which we're really excited about. But I think it's just good to have it acknowledged that it can be quite high level work, and especially when people have severe and complex needs. So not that it can't be done, but we do sometimes need some quite strong expertise in that area. Okay, I've kind of talked about that, about letting the relationship be what it's going to be and not trying to predefine it and say it doesn't look like how I thought it would look, so therefore it's not a real relationship or friendship. Another thing that we do that has been really influential is creating new professional roles. So we have a role called a social catalyst, and it's kind of inspired a little bit by the Plan Canada model, who Plan Canada look for people that are highly socially and emotionally intelligent and bring with them energy and fun. Those people that are kind of the life of the party and create a really good vibe wherever they go. We have 2 people, so at the moment, so Matt and Chloe. Matt's just gone to Canada on study tour, which is annoying, but he's going to come back being extra amazing at what he does. And it's just from the realisation, especially as people come into late teenager and young adulthood, that, mum and dad aren't the right people to be the social catalyst for them, that sometimes people do need additional support, who the right people are to do that. We're tending to recruit high school teachers who have an understanding of adolescent culture and psychology, or young people who are just really quite evolved, and people who can understand and break into those cultures. So one thing that parents often say to us is that, the social inclusion happened in primary school okay, but it dropped off in high school, and like that's inevitable because people got boyfriends and so forth. I think our experience is that there is a risk of that happening, but there are often reasons why that happens. So when we started talking to Eli's friends, there were a lot of awkward questions they wanted answered. So is it okay for us to talk about sex in front of Eli? He started going to parties where things happen that, actually this is a bit of a spoiler alert for people who've got pre-teens, okay? There's rocky times ahead. Teenagers like to do things that their parents don't know about, and actually they often seem to have quite a strong caring about their friend with a disability who you know, they're just not sure if it's okay for them to go to parties where certain things are happening, and they don't want to ask mum and dad because they're not meant to be doing it anyway. And that's kind of what the social catalyst role has overcome for us, that the kids are actually talking to these guys about, you know, what their needs are and how is Eli going to go to a party where there's drinking? Is he allowed to drink? What's the rules? All of that kind of thing. So we found his social inclusion's increased greatly by us addressing that stuff. Again, that's tricky, but okay. So these folks tend to bring a lot of happiness and fun and silliness with them. There's some photos there. That's Matt in the bottom corner, and that's Chloe up there with her tongue stuck out. Certainly not a traditional support worker role. These guys have a completely different MO to support workers generally. All right, number 9, make reflection a part of your process. We don't give up because things don't work. We reflect, we talk with one another, we have another go. We support each other through that. And number 10 is, you could connect with us. At the moment, we've got a website that's going live soon, but it isn't quite live yet. So if you're interested, you could like us on Facebook, and we're up for talking about friendship and answering questions about friendship and building friendship anytime that you like. And we run workshops around friendship with families as well if people want some additional support. Okay, that's me. Thank you.